more than 5,000 years ago, long before the rise of Rome, long before Greece gave the world democracy, and thousands of years before the birth of modern nations, a civilization emerged along the banks of a single river that would change human history forever. Surrounded by endless deserts, ancient Egypt should never have existed. To the east stretched the harsh Arabian desert. To the west lay the vast Sahara, one of the most unforgiving places on earth. Rain almost never fell, and survival seemed impossible. Yet through the middle of this lifeless landscape flowed a river unlike any other, the Nile. Every year, almost like clockwork, the Nile overflowed its banks. As the floodwaters slowly retreated, they left behind a rich layer of black soil. What looked like a barren desert suddenly became some of the most fertile farmland in the ancient world. For the people who lived there, the river wasn't simply water, it was life itself. The Egyptians called this fertile land the Black Land, while the surrounding desert became known as the Red Land. One represented life, the other represented death. Between them stood one of history's greatest civilizations. But ancient Egypt wasn't built in a single day. For thousands of years, small farming villages appeared along the Nile. Families learned to grow wheat and barley, domesticate animals, and fish from the river. As food became more plentiful, villages grew into towns. Towns became cities. And slowly, these communities began trading with one another. The Nile became Egypt's first highway. Boats carried grain, stone, wood, gold, and ideas from one settlement to another. Instead of dividing the people, the river connected them. It gave Egypt something few early civilizations enjoyed. Yet unity didn't come without conflict. By around 3200 BC, the Nile Valley was divided into two separate kingdoms. In the north, where the river spread into a wide delta before reaching the Mediterranean Sea, lay Lower Egypt. To the south, where the Nile cut through narrow valleys surrounded by cliffs, stood Upper Egypt. Despite their names, Upper Egypt was actually farther south because the Nile flows from south to north. For generations, these two kingdoms competed for land, wealth, and power. Then, everything changed. A powerful ruler from Upper Egypt, remembered by history as Narmer, marched north and united the two kingdoms under a single crown. Whether through conquest, diplomacy, or a combination of both, Egypt became one kingdom around 3100 BC. It was one of the first unified states in human history. Narmer's victory did more than create a kingdom. It created the office of the Pharaoh, a ruler believed to be chosen by the gods themselves. To ordinary Egyptians, the Pharaoh wasn't simply a king. He was the bridge between heaven and earth. His duty wasn't only to command armies or collect taxes. He was responsible for maintaining harmony throughout the universe. The Egyptians believed that if the Pharaoh failed, the natural order itself could collapse. Crops would fail, the Nile might not flood, chaos would replace order. This belief gave the Pharaoh extraordinary authority. His words became law. His image appeared across the land. His victories were carved into stone, and his achievements were celebrated as proof that the gods still favored Egypt. But ruling such a kingdom required more than power alone. Officials were appointed to collect taxes, supervise construction, organize harvests, and record information. Scribes carefully wrote everything down using a remarkable writing system known today as hieroglyphics. Unlike simple symbols, hieroglyphics combined pictures, sounds, and meanings into one of the world's earliest writing systems. Temple walls, monuments, and papyrus scrolls preserved everything from religious ceremonies to trade records and royal achievements. Writing transformed Egypt. Knowledge could now survive long after the people who created it were gone. As Egypt became richer, its cities expanded. Farmers produced food far beyond what they needed for themselves. This surplus allowed craftsmen, architects, priests, and artists to specialize in their work. The kingdom was becoming more than a collection of villages. It was becoming one of humanity's first great civilizations. And soon, its rulers would begin building monuments so enormous that thousands of years later, they would still dominate the desert skyline, leaving generations to wonder one impossible question. How did people with no modern machines build wonders that still stand today? With Egypt finally united under a single ruler, the kingdom entered a period unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. Historians call it the Old Kingdom, an age of confidence, stability, and extraordinary ambition. For the first time, Egypt had a strong central government, a growing population, and enough wealth to dream beyond simple survival. The pharaohs no longer wanted to be remembered for years. They wanted to be remembered forever. To understand why, you have to understand what the Egyptians believed happened after death. For them, death was not the end of life, it was the beginning of another journey. The Egyptians believed every person possessed a spiritual life force known as the Ka. After death, the Ka would continue to exist, but only if the body remained intact and received food, prayers, and offerings from the living. If the body decayed or was destroyed, the soul itself could be lost forever. Protecting the body became one of the most important responsibilities in Egyptian society. This belief inspired the earliest royal tombs, known as mastabas, large rectangular structures built from mud brick with underground burial chambers hidden beneath them. They were impressive for their time, but one pharaoh believed he deserved something far greater. That pharaoh was Djoser. His closest advisor was a brilliant architect, engineer, and physician named Imhotep. Instead of building a single mastaba, Imhotep stacked several on top of one another, each smaller than the one below it. The result was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. The Pyramid of Djoser, often called the Step Pyramid, became the world's first massive stone monument. It wasn't just a tomb, it was a declaration. Egypt had entered an entirely new age of engineering. The success of Djoser's pyramid inspired later pharaohs to dream even bigger. Each ruler wanted a monument larger than the last, a structure worthy of a king who believed he would become one with the gods. No pharaoh pursued that dream more boldly than Khufu. Around 2580 BC, Khufu ordered the construction of what would become the greatest architectural achievement of the ancient world, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Even today, its numbers are astonishing, originally standing about 146 meters, or 481 feet tall. It remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth for nearly 3,800 years. It was built using an estimated 3 million stone blocks, many weighing between 2 and 15 tons. Some granite blocks used inside the king's chamber weighed more than 70 tons and had been transported hundreds of kilometers from southern Egypt. For centuries, people wondered whether such a monument could really have been built by ancient humans. Some imagined lost civilizations. Others claimed aliens must have helped. But archaeology tells a different, and arguably more remarkable story. The pyramids were built by skilled Egyptian workers. Excavations near Giza have uncovered workers' villages complete with homes, bakeries, breweries, workshops, and cemeteries. The builders were not slaves chained beneath the desert sun, as popular myths often suggest. Many were paid laborers, craftsmen, engineers, and farmers who worked on royal projects during the Nile's annual flooding, when their fields were underwater. Thousands of workers organized into specialized teams hauled enormous limestone blocks using sledges pulled across wet sand, reducing friction and making the stones easier to move. Others carefully shaped each block so precisely that many still fit together with astonishing accuracy thousands of years later. The construction demanded incredible planning. Engineers surveyed the land with remarkable precision. Stonecutters, transport crews, architects, and supervisors worked together like parts of a giant machine. Every stage depended on careful organization and years of preparation. The Great Pyramid wasn't simply a display of wealth. It demonstrated the power of a kingdom capable of coordinating tens of thousands of people toward a single goal. But Khufu's pyramid was only the beginning. Nearby, his successors Khafre and Menkaure built their own pyramids, creating the famous skyline that still defines Egypt today. Watching over these monuments stood another mystery. Carved from a single massive block of limestone, the Great Sphinx of Giza combined the body of a lion with the face of a king. For thousands of years, it has stared silently across the desert, surviving sandstorms, invasions, and the passing of entire civilizations. Its true purpose remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Some believe it guarded the royal tombs. Others see it as a symbol of divine power, protecting the eternal resting place of Egypt's kings. Whatever its original meaning, together the pyramids and the Sphinx transformed the Giza Plateau into one of the most recognizable landscapes on Earth. They became symbols not only of ancient Egypt, but of humanity's ability to achieve the seemingly impossible. Yet while the pharaohs were as the pyramids rose above the desert, Egypt entered an age of extraordinary wealth and influence. For centuries, the Nile had provided everything the kingdom needed. Every summer, its floodwaters spread across the valley, leaving behind rich black soil that transformed the desert into fertile farmland. The harvests were so abundant that Egypt produced far more food than its people could eat. Food became the foundation of Egyptian power. The pharaoh controlled enormous granaries filled with wheat and barley. During years when neighboring kingdoms suffered drought or famine, Egypt still had food to trade. Grain became as valuable as gold, allowing Egypt to strengthen its economy while expanding its influence across the ancient world. The Nile was far more than a river. It was the lifeline of an entire civilization. Thousands of boats traveled its waters every year, carrying limestone from nearby quarries, granite from the south, gold from Nubia, copper from the Sinai Peninsula, cedar wood from Lebanon, and luxury goods from distant lands. The river connected every major city, making travel and trade faster than almost anywhere else in the ancient world. As wealth flowed through the kingdom, Egypt's cities flourished. Bustling markets appeared along the riverbanks, where merchants sold linen clothing, colorful pottery, perfumes, jewelry, furniture, fresh produce, and handcrafted tools. Skilled artisans became famous for their remarkable craftsmanship. Goldsmiths created delicate crowns and necklaces, sculptors carved lifelike statues from stone, and painters covered temples with vibrant scenes that still survive thousands of years later. But Egypt's greatest achievement wasn't its wealth, it was its knowledge. Among the most respected people in society were the scribes. Learning to become a scribe required years of education. Students memorized hundreds of hieroglyphic symbols and practiced writing every day. Since very few people could read or write, scribes held an incredibly important position within Egyptian society. They recorded taxes, harvests, military campaigns, trade agreements, religious ceremonies, and royal decrees. Every decision made by the government passed through the hands of a scribe. Without them, the kingdom simply could not function. Education became one of Egypt's greatest strengths. Young students spent years studying mathematics, reading, writing, and administration. These skills allowed Egypt to manage one of the most advanced governments in the ancient world. Mathematics proved especially valuable. Egyptian engineers measured land after every annual flood, calculated building dimensions, and planned enormous construction projects with astonishing accuracy. Even today, experts are amazed by the precision of Egyptian architecture. Their knowledge extended far beyond engineering. Ancient Egyptian physicians were among the finest doctors of their time. Medical texts describe treatments for broken bones, burns, wounds, infections, and even dental problems. Doctors stitched injuries, used wooden splints to repair fractured limbs, and treated wounds with honey, which modern science now recognizes for its natural antibacterial properties. Although religion remained closely connected to medicine, Egyptian doctors relied heavily on careful observation and practical experience. Many of their methods influenced civilizations that followed for centuries. Religion itself shaped every aspect of Egyptian life. The Egyptians believed the universe depended upon balance and harmony, a sacred principle known as ma'at. Every person had a role in protecting this balance, but no one carried a greater responsibility than the pharaoh. If the pharaoh ruled wisely, the gods would bless Egypt with peace, good harvests, and the annual flooding of the Nile. If he failed, chaos could consume the kingdom. Magnificent temples were built across Egypt, not for ordinary worshippers, but as sacred homes for the gods. Priests performed daily rituals, presented offerings of food and incense, dressed divine statues, and prayed for the continued prosperity of the land. Among Egypt's most important deities was Ra, the sun god who brought light to the world each day. Osiris ruled over the afterlife and became a symbol of resurrection. Isis represented motherhood, healing, and protection, while Horus, the falcon-headed god, embodied kingship and divine authority. Together, these beliefs united millions of people under a common vision of life, death, and eternity. For generations, Egypt seemed unstoppable. Its harvests remained plentiful. Its monuments grew larger. Its cities became richer. Its influence spread farther across the ancient world. To outsiders, Egypt appeared eternal. But beneath the surface, cracks had already begun to appear. As powerful local governors accumulated wealth and influence, many became less dependent on the pharaoh. Some ruled their own regions almost like independent kings. At the same time, weaker rulers inherited the throne, lacking the authority and leadership of the great pharaohs who had built the pyramids. The powerful government that had once united Egypt slowly began to weaken. The age of the pyramid builders was coming to an end, and soon ancient Egypt would face its first great collapse, proving that even the world's greatest civilization was not immune to the rise and fall of history. The collapse did not happen overnight. There was no single battle that destroyed ancient Egypt. No foreign army marched in and erased its civilization. Instead, the kingdom slowly weakened from within. After centuries of powerful rule, the authority of the pharaoh began to fade. Local governors, known as nomarchs, had grown incredibly wealthy. Originally appointed to manage different regions of Egypt, many now controlled their own armies, collected their own taxes, and ruled almost independently. Their loyalty to the pharaoh became weaker with each passing generation. At the same time, nature turned against Egypt. For several years, the annual flooding of the Nile became smaller than expected. Without enough floodwater, the rich black soil received less nourishment. Harvests declined. Food became scarce. Prices rose, and famine spread across the kingdom. When people became hungry, faith in the pharaoh began to disappear. For centuries, Egyptians believed their ruler maintained harmony between the gods and the world. But if the Nile no longer flooded as it should, many questioned whether the pharaoh still possessed divine favor. The kingdom slowly descended into chaos. Without a strong central government, rival rulers competed for power. Different regions fought one another, trade declined, and many royal building projects came to an end. The magnificent age of pyramid construction was over. Historians call this period the First Intermediate Period. For nearly a century, Egypt remained divided. Yet even during its darkest years, civilization refused to disappear. Around 205 BC, a ruler from the southern city of Thebes finally reunited the kingdom. His victory marked the beginning of the Middle Kingdom, an era often described as Egypt's golden age of recovery. Unlike some earlier pharaohs who focused almost entirely on building massive monuments, the rulers of the Middle Kingdom invested heavily in strengthening the nation itself. New canals were dug to improve irrigation. Farming expanded into previously unused land. Trade routes reopened across Africa and the Near East. Once again, the Nile carried merchants, soldiers, and travelers throughout the kingdom. Egypt grew richer than ever before. Its influence stretched far beyond its borders. Caravans crossed vast deserts, carrying ivory, gold, incense, precious stones, and exotic animals from the south. Ships sailed the Red Sea and the Mediterranean, bringing valuable goods from distant civilizations. The kingdom became one of the wealthiest powers in the ancient world. Art and literature also flourished. Writers composed stories, poems, and wisdom texts that explored justice, leadership, loyalty, and human nature. Sculptors created realistic statues filled with emotion rather than idealized perfection. Egyptian culture became more sophisticated with every generation, but prosperity attracted attention. To the northeast, new groups of people had begun moving toward Egypt. Some arrived peacefully as merchants and settlers. Others came seeking something far more valuable: power. Around 1650 BC, a foreign people known as the Hyksos entered the Nile Delta. Unlike previous invaders, they possessed military technology that Egypt had never faced before. They fought from fast-moving horse-drawn chariots. They used powerful composite bows capable of firing arrows farther and with greater force than traditional Egyptian weapons. Their bronze weapons gave them another important advantage. The Egyptian army, unprepared for these new methods of warfare, struggled to stop them. The Hyksos captured northern Egypt and established their own capital in the Delta. For the first time in centuries, much of Egypt was ruled by foreign kings. It was a humiliating moment in Egyptian history. But defeat became an unexpected lesson. Instead of rejecting the invaders' technology, the Egyptians studied it. They learned to build chariots. They mastered the composite bow. They strengthened their military and trained a new generation of professional soldiers. What began as a painful occupation would soon transform Egypt into one of the greatest military powers the ancient world had ever seen. The time for simply defending the Nile was over. Egypt was about to build an empire. This is the part 1, and you will see much more adventure in part 2. Stay with us.